Hello, good morning and welcome to Friday's OTB AM. It is one hell of a sports weekend ahead and we've got some good stuff coming for you between now and 9 o'clock, including some very exciting studio guests, or at least a studio guest to come, so that's on the way very shortly. And as always on a Friday morning, Owen Sheehan is alongside me. Good morning to you, Owen.
Morning, Adrian. How are things?
Happy Groundhog Day.
Happy Groundhog Day indeed, yeah.
We were very excited around the office this morning, since we were in at about 3 a.m, and the two main areas of excitement were the amount of coverage of Joe Molloy across the Backpages this morning. That was certainly one of them. And then the other one was Groundhog Day. You're, absolutely buzzing about this thing.
We'll get to the former in a moment, but the latter certainly is where we should start, because it is Groundhog Day, and I've been preaching on this show all week that tomorrow in Paris could have a very familiar feel about it, especially given the landscape that we've been talking about all week, that, Ireland are going to go over there and it's going to be a record win for Ireland. Apparently, we're not only going to beat them, we're going to surpass our record 7-point victory against France, which has very much a feel of Groundhog Day about it, this kind of feeling of bitterness that could be coming along down the line. I don't think it's going to happen.
A French team in disarray. It's just an annual thing.
I just think there's a chance of it on the weekend of Groundhog Day. You've also got Dublin going to Tyrone. Now, if Groundhog Day happened there, that will be a huge positive for everybody. Because
what is Groundhog Day in that context, yeah?
It would be the Battle of Omagh 2.0, 12 years on, so apparently 12 is, it could be the magic number here. Ireland went to Paris and got beaten 43-31, I think, in 2006. In the year 2006, of course, Sean Kavanagh was an All-Ireland champion with Tyrone from 2005. He plays in Croke Park this weekend with Moy. Yeah. He could become a champion, once again, an All-Ireland champion. You look at Arsenal, basically, and after a fairly...
that's just an ongoing saga of...
Exactly. There's going to be a winner with Arsenal anyway, that's for sure. After a fairly kind of a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, you suspect there could be darkness as Theo Walcott could come back and haunt his old club, as has happened on many previous occasions with Arsenal. You could have Seamus Coleman, who's done very well against Arsenal in the past. A Groundhog Day from the first part of the Premier League season as well, when Spurs go up against Liverpool. Could Spurs hammer Liverpool once again? There's so many potential things here, but the big one, of course, is on Sunday evening, when there will definitely be Groundhog Day, when the Philadelphia Eagles are in there or thereabouts against New England Patriots, and once again Bill Belichick and Tom Brady will step up and win this game. It'll look dramatic, but it won't be dramatic. Belichick will have a stony face, so will Tom Brady. He'll have ice in his veins, and we'll all go to bed at 4 a.m. very disappointed on Monday morning.
I'll probably bounce out at about 2 o'clock when the game is sort of done and dusted in the half. Who's on the halftime show?
Justin Timberlake.
I'm definitely hanging around to see Justin Timberlake on the halftime show at Super Bowl. I was listening to Kevin Cullen last night as well, so I'm stoked. I'm yourself, Owen, I'm a huge American football. I'm a huge football. I just call it football. I'm a huge football fan. So
I call it fling. That's how much of
fling.
That's how much of an American football fan I am.
I wasn't even aware that was a thing. We're assuming that everybody knows what Groundhog Day is, right? This is a sort of exists in popular culture, certainly of yesteryear.
I'm sure if somebody doesn't, if somebody knows what off the ball is but don't know what Groundhog Day is, then there is a groundhog right there.
Groundhog seems to be sort of a cross between a hedgehog and a beaver, I think, is sort of the best way to put it.
Yeah, kind of a rodent is how you would describe it, I would say, yeah.
I was making the point just before we came in there that there's literally nothing that Bill Murray has done that I won't get behind.
That's a big flaw in your character.
Possibly, yeah. Even stuff that I haven't seen, I'm just sure, I just know before I watch it, I'm going to love it.
Groundhog Day is a 6 out of 10 movie. It was put, I think, in the top 30 of BBC's top 100 comedies of all time. The fact that it was considered a comedy is a shame in itself, to be honest, because it's one of the most unfunny movies that are out there, and definitely one of the most overrated movies that are out there.
He's done better. I definitely can see that Bill Murray has better stuff than Groundhog Day, but I do remember the first time I watched it being fairly hilarious. It's certainly a law of diminishing returns.
There's not a single hilarious scene in it. And you were saying, you were kind of giving me the patronising line before we came on air. It's like, oh, you're too young to really appreciate Groundhog Day. Well,
that's not what I said at all, actually. But go on anyway. No, don't worry about misrepresenting my point. Go on.
It's the whole idea of warping time, which of course has been done at its very zenith in the 1980s. Can't even remember, the Groundhog Day is 1990s anyway, but you look at Back to the Future and that's an absolute classic. That is textbook how you do time warping, and Groundhog Day fails miserably in that regard.
Yeah, well, essentially it was just recreating the same scenes over and over and over again. Just when you thought you got to the end of it, it was like, we'll do it again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully not from an Irish perspective anyway this weekend. We will see sort of a Bill Murray-esque failure in France.
Yeah, although we have been in the habit of beating France over recent years. Mostly, so settle for that kind of ground.
Mostly, but it's never been a trashing that one Mr. Jerry Gilroy has been touting all week on this show, that we're going to go there and we're going to kill them. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, we shall see. We shall see. On. We're going to be getting into all of that with Keith Wood a bit later on. It's, as I said, pretty busy weekend of sport as well. The Irish rugby team are going to train in Paris this morning as the countdown continues to that Six Nations opener against France tomorrow. That's a 4:45 kick-off for that, so we will be previewing that with Keith Wood in studio a little bit later on. We're going to have the Aviva fan studio as well, by the way, from the G Hotel. We're on the road tomorrow, so that's the G Hotel in Galway in the company of some legends, a little bit like a bit of a retirement home, mind you, because it's Tommy Bowe, John Muldoon and Jenny Murphy, all of whom have bounced out of the international game over the last few weeks indeed, so I'm sure we'll get into some of that with the guys. The under-20s will take on the French counterparts. That game is in Bordeaux this evening. Riyad Mahrez, meanwhile, is MIA at the minute. He has not showed up for Leicester training. All sorts of coverage of that across the back pages today, so we'll get into that very shortly. That's ahead of Leicester's game against Swansea at the King Power tomorrow. And in the golf, Shane Lowry is 1 under par heading into the second day of the Waste Management Phoenix Open in Arizona. He shot around a 70, 6 back from the leader, Bill Haas. That's the state of play in the world of sports news this morning. Coming up on OTB AM between now and 9 o'clock. Meanwhile, we're going to be getting stuck into the back pages very shortly. We'll tell you what's going on, including a look at the many photographs and reflections on TV3's new Six Nation presenter, Joe Molloy, so that's upcoming, and plenty more as well. Besides, we have great competition for you to let you know about this morning. If you're a racing fan, particularly this one is for you. We're giving you a pair of tickets, weekend festival passes to the Dublin Horse Racing Festival this weekend at Leopardstown Racecourse. So the headline acts there are going to include Damien Dempsey, DJ Vogue Williams and Stockton's Wing. Who doesn't love a bit of Stockton's Wing? On, you're all for a bit of that?
Yeah, more DJ Vogue Williams, who you didn't know was a DJ before we came on.
I had no idea what Vogue Williams is doing there, but it turns out she's DJing. So.
Apparently she's a pretty good DJ.
Very good. There'll be 7 Grade 1 races with the prize money to the value of £1.5 million. Comedians there are going to be Frank Cook, Fred Cook, even Eric Lawler, Alison Spittle and Garov Farley. They'll be performing over the 2 days. For more there, you can see leopardstown.com/Dublin Racing Festival or hashtag Dublin Racing Festival. And the winner of those 2 tickets is going to be the best comment over the next hour and a little bit. So get your best stuff coming into us at hashtag OTBAM or leave a comment below here on the Facebook page or whatever you're having yourself, right? It's 5 to 8 on this Friday morning. As I said, lots of stuff upcoming over the next little bit. We do, however, want to start with the ongoing case in Belfast this week. The barrister representing the Ulster Rugby player Paddy Jackson resumes his cross-examination this morning of a woman who claims that she was raped by Jackson and his teammate Stuart Olding. Earlier this week she gave evidence of Jackson pushing her onto his bed during a party at his Belfast home in June of 2016, claiming that he knew she didn't want to have sex with her but carried on regardless before Stuart Olding came in and forced to give him oral sex. Our courts correspondent Frank Greaney has been covering this story and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Frank. I believe there was a lot of focus on messages yesterday that were sent, that she had sent to some friends in the hours after the alleged rapes. Can you tell us what those messages were about and I guess also the significance of them?
Sure. Well, in his opening address earlier in the week, the prosecuting barrister Toby Hedworth touched on these text messages. But I suppose yesterday, given it was his first opportunity to cross-examine the witness, Mr. Brendan Kelly, who was representing Paddy Jackson and was the first to take to his feet in what's going to be a lengthy cross-examination, he went through those text messages with a fine-tooth comb. So the content of those text messages were read out yesterday, and it was an exchange of messages between her and a few of her friends in the immediate aftermath of what she alleges happened in the early hours of June 28th, 2016. Her friends were urging her to go to the police when she made the allegations of rape against Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding. And she was saying that she was reluctant to go to the police, and she was outlining in these text messages her reasons for not wanting to go to the police. She said that it would be a case of her word against theirs, that there were more of them, that she feared that they would just make up a story, they would fabricate a story, and that she wouldn't be believed. And she also felt that Ulster Rugby would vouch for the players, and that it'd be her word against theirs, that there wouldn't be any charges brought, and that she would have to go through the whole ordeal of the police interview process. Now, you asked me about the significance of those text messages, and I suppose the reason they were brought up by Mr. Kelly yesterday was he wanted to know why she left certain, what he considered to be important details out of those text messages, and they included the fact that she claims in later police interviews that a woman walked in, that one of the 3 girls who were also at the party in Paddy Jackson's home that night, that she walked in while she was allegedly being raped by the two players. Now, she was asked why she didn't mention that, the fact that a witness had walked in, why she hadn't mentioned that to her friends. She kept referring to it being a case of my word against theirs. And he said, well, surely it would have been a case of their word against ours. And she said that, you know, in the immediate aftermath, she didn't give her friends a blow-by-blow account. She said she felt this woman's presence was secondary, that she didn't touch her, she had nothing to do with what happened. She said she didn't know her. In her direct evidence yesterday, or the day before rather, she said that when this woman walked in, she turned away and she feared that she was coming up to film what was going on. She said that in the party downstairs, photographs and videos were being taken. So she was worried that she was going to be filmed. So she turned around and didn't get a good look at her, and she wasn't able to identify her. And she was also asked why she admitted the specific allegation against Stuart Olding is that, like you mentioned in your opening piece, Adrian, is that he forced her to perform oral sex on him. And she asked, Mr. Kelly asked again yesterday why she didn't bring that up in these text messages. And she said, again, she just didn't feel like she needed to tell her friends every demeaning detail about what happened.
Frank, what can we expect from today's proceedings?
Today's proceedings will begin again at 10:30 with Brendan Kelly resuming his cross-examination. Yesterday afternoon, the jury was shown some video footage of the first interview she did with police. She did it with a specially trained police officer. It's one of two interviews she did. And she again went through the allegations that she's made against the men in greater detail, I suppose, than the direct evidence she gave herself from the witness box. That's going to continue today. There's a second interview. I think he's going to show that to the jury as well. He'll then be given another opportunity to question her afterwards, and then it will be up to the other three legal teams. I believe Stuart Olding's defence barrister is next in line, so if he wishes to cross-examine her, he will do so. He'll be given an opportunity to do so. It's a process, I imagine, which will take a couple of days for the entire cross-examination to be completed.
Frank, thanks for that. Frank Greaney there in Belfast. We'll be speaking to Frank as long as that case continues. I'm sure we'll be back on with the guys again on Monday morning. Now, elsewhere in the world of sport, we want to get into the back pages this morning, give you a bit of a flavour of what's going on there. Owen's going to kick us off with the Irish Times.
Indeed, yeah. Six Nations coverage dominating the back pages this morning, and in Sports Friday in the Irish Times it says Ryan ready for French challenge. That's Joe Schmidt there, Joey Thornley's piece, saying the Leinster youngster to get his big day after being handed his Six Nations debut. He's one of two Six Nations debutants. Jacob Stockdale, of course, making his first start in the Six Nations against France in Paris tomorrow. In the Irish Examiner, as good as it gets, reads the front of the sports section, Donal Lenihan on why Irish rugby is primed for success. Ronan O'Gara is saying then as well, the French players now know that Ireland are better than them, and that could be a key point in this whole complex, this superiority complex that could have shifted well in Ireland's favour. We'll see tomorrow if we do indeed go to Paris and have a record win. Schmidt backs his young guns. Coach parks big issues to focus on French challenge. While on the back of the Irish Daily Mail it says Schmidt fires up engines. Coach eyes fast start to avoid repeat of last year. There's Johnny Sexton there in training. And finally, from the Six Nations leads in today's back pages, the Times Ireland edition is going with the Rory best angle. Best visit to trial eclipses Irish build-up. That's Gary Doyle there with a concerned-looking Joe Schmidt on the back of the Times Ireland edition.
Right, we're going on to the Irish Daily Star this morning, and there's some great stuff from Ger Loughnane in the back page of the Irish Daily Star this morning. It's like the old days of communism behind the Iron Curtain, he says. It's an interesting read about the state of Clare hurling. I have to say, having read it, it feels like a bit of a come and get me plea from Ger Loughnane this morning. We'll see how that pans out over the next while, but he's got some interesting stuff to say about the state of hurling in the county. We might get to that in a few minutes. Reflections there as well on Joe Schmidt's dilemma in Paris, particularly in relation to Rory Best and that case we've just been speaking to in his appearance at it during the week. And Conte's Inferno is the other big story in the back page of the Daily Star this morning. Chelsea boss is going through hell. My heart bleeds for him, I have to say. That's the Star this morning. In the Herald, would Tyrone 05 beat Gavin's Dubs? Sean Kavanagh certainly feels that they probably would, and they have a nice little section actually in here. Apart from the side, I should say, from the Six Nations pullout, there's a sort of 2005 v 2017 Dubs, and I kind of thought, looking at it initially, well, there's no way that 2005 team would beat Dublin, but actually I'd say they give them a good shake. The fitness thing might be the one aspect that you kind of think might go significantly in Dublin's favour. Obviously, the levels of fitness these days. Front page of the Evening Herald this morning as well was a story that we wanted to mention. This is in relation to the former swimming coach Frank McCann, who is serving a sentence for the murder of his wife and his child. This dates back from 1992, and it's a story by Conor Feehan in the Herald this morning, and the fear of the victim's sister today that this Frank McCann is due soon to be released from jail. He's already been out on parole, and the comments this morning that I think the parole board are looking on him as a bed blocker, and they just want to release him to free up space. Says the victim's sister, Marion Leonard, in the newspaper this morning. She plans to write to Justice Minister Charlie Flanagan to express her concerns over McCann's possible release. He is the final decision. She says the parole board are being very naive to think that it will be safe to release this child murderer back into any community. It was a case that dates back to 1992, and reading up at it this morning, a harrowing and fairly horrific case. Someone close to the investigation describing McCann over the course of the reporting around the case as a consummate actor, which gives you a bit of an insight into the type of character we're dealing with. He'll go down in history as an exceptional killer. The same source was quoted as saying it was a harrowing case. During the last day of the trial that he read a novel, apparently a murder mystery, but also he was one of the lead swimming coaches in the country at the time. Conor Feehan reports this morning McCann was also close friends with two of the country's most dangerous sex offenders, national swimming coaches George Gibney and Derry O'Rourke, both of whom, as he points out, would later be charged with a string of vile sex abuse offences against young swimmers. And there was a bizarre motive here quoted as well, that Frank McCann and his now deceased wife had made an application for adoption in the previous year. The Adoption Parole Board had been contacted by a woman who said her 17-year-old daughter with special needs had a child by the swimming coach Frank McCann, and obviously that was complicating the process, but good reporting in the Herald this morning by Conor Feehan there. That's what's happening there. Elsewhere across the back pages this morning, on much more of a lighter note, it's the back page of the Mirror, where AWOL star drug test fear. This is a sort of a slightly bizarre angle on the fact that Riyad Mahrez has essentially gone missing. He wanted to get a move to Manchester City. It didn't happen. The club wouldn't let him go, and now he's kind of thrown his toys out of the pram and saying, I'm not really going to bother. I think they're playing Swansea over the weekend. Whether he's going to show up to that or not remains to be seen. That's the back page of the Mirror. And I think finally for me, you've got the Sun. It's got kind of the same stuff going on here. Riyad enough. Players fume at Mahrez' rebel claims. Club have been unfair to him. We were talking about the infamous case of Peter Odemwingie during the week, who fled from West Brom to QPR in a move that never happened, I don't think, in the end. But he rocked up at sort of 11 p.m. on the transfer deadline day, and the move didn't go through, and he eventually had to sort of put his tail between his legs and head back. Which is more embarrassing, Mahrez or Odemwingie? Odemwingie, I would say, is probably going to go down as the most embarrassing transfer thing to ever happened. But in terms of going back into your dressing room and interacting with your teammates, I think Mahrez is a bit more embarrassing, because the thing that fell through here was as a result of Mahrez going and being... Mahrez really wanted this. Of course Odemwingie wanted that as well, but the embarrassing thing that happened was that the transfer fell through, and that Odemwingie, in fairness, he had to be there if it was going to go through. Like, it was kind of out of his control. I know the Mahrez thing was out of his control as well, but the embarrassing nature of that is that... I think they're both highly embarrassing. I just think the slight difference is... I mean, he's so embarrassed he hasn't even gone back to training, because there is that bit of a... I think everybody understands that Riyad Mahrez is better than Leicester City. I mean, I've said it. He's our best player, I'm going to stick by it. So everybody understands that he could very easily go and play his football at Manchester City, but I just think the fact that Peter Odemwingie hopped into his car, and there was footage or photographs. There was Sky Sports News got him. He's arrived at the ground, Jim. I think that's more embarrassing. Let's have a look at the Irish News. Colm Kavanagh, I think, speaking to the Irish News today ahead of that Dublin game. Colm doesn't believe gap is that wide. Criticism hard to fathom
after 12-point defeat to Dubs. Of course, Colm and Sean will not be involved with Tyrone this weekend. They're playing for Moy, as I mentioned, against Michael Glavies in the All-Ireland Intermediate Club Football Championship final. We're going to change a little bit of tack to racing. There's a couple of leads today, of course. In front of the Racing Post, a huge weekend of racing here. That's Robbie Power on the front with Our Duke. The rousing story of Irish Gold Cup hope, Our Duke. And that's on page 4 inside. If you picked up a copy of the Racing Post today, that's in terms of the Irish Gold Cup, which goes to post on Sunday. O'Leary, time to let Sam Crow do talking at Leopardstown. I think that's Sam Crow's first Grade 1 race going in novices, and I think he's playing down the fact that the extra length that Sam Crow is going to be involved with at Leopardstown this weekend is not one that people should be keeping an eye on when it comes to Cheltenham. He's trying to keep his hopes up for Cheltenham, in fact, which you don't actually see a trainer doing too often. While on the Daily Telegraph, it's a racing story of a very different nature. It's an exclusive saying racing may change colour of fences to improve horse vision, which is an interesting one given, was it Ruby Walsh complaining about shadows recently?
Oh, was he?
Or it was Willie Mullins, sorry.
Right.
Willie Mullins was, just with regards to the Nichols Canyon death around Christmas, he reckons that Nichols Canyon got caught on the fence because the horse jumped too early, believing that it was actually a yard or two further closer to the horse than it really was because of the shadow. So maybe changing the colours of fences will improve horse vision and save a few horses in the process, you'd imagine. Anything
that can be done on that front is obviously a great thing. I do find it slightly bizarre on the weekend that's in it with the start of the Six Nations in a newspaper like the Telegraph particularly, that the Six Nations and the little picture of Eddie Jones and Dylan Hartley here isn't the full page spread.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I was going to say because it's an exclusive, but then I read at the top, the Telegraph also have a Six Nations exclusive. They're saying Italians plan more tricks to bamboozle England. Eddie Jones' men warned opponents have 4 or 5 tactics to frustrate champions. Speaking of Groundhog Day, could well be Groundhog Day of last year. Well, we'll all remember.
His bullshit is Groundhog Day. I mean, he is actually the Jose Mourinho of the rugby world.
Yeah, but let's not forget what Italy did to England last year, the no-ruck tactic, and of course they face off in the first weekend of the Six Nations on Sunday, so that could be very interesting. They've got more tricks up their sleeve. That's a Telegraph exclusive. And then this story, the one that we covered just 7 days ago on this very show, The Guardian leading with CU in Pyeongchang, CAS ruling on Russia doping bans leave IOC in state of chaos before next week's Winter Olympics. We brought you that breaking news on yesterday morning's OTB AM. We had Jim Walden, the lawyer for Grigory Rodchenkov, as I say on the show 7 days ago. He has failed in his case to uphold the bans.
Jim Walden back at some point, because I know definitely looking at
happy.
That he'd released a statement yesterday which you were saying is not really normally the thing that he does. He doesn't really tend to, they're not really enough for publicity anyway, it's a short story, but I had made the point that this was the biggest interrogation of Dr. Rodchenkov's facts, ultimately. Like, this was kind of the most important thing, and that if it fell down, that it wouldn't reflect amazingly on him, and that's as it has turned out, unfortunately. And part of Jim Walden's press release was certainly addressing that aspect and saying that actually, you know, his evidence is still stacks up and is still as true as all the commissions who've interrogated it have endorsed it, as they say it is. But I mean, just fascinating and kind of mind-boggling, and largely very depressing that was the outcome of that CAS case during the week. I have to say, it was very deflating to read that.
Yeah, life bans are unenforceable is what I've learned from this.
Yeah. A few comments in. We're going to get stuck into some of those stories in the back pages in just a second, but a couple of comments in. Firstly from Emma Keane here, which is going to be hard beaten for the comment of the morning to win the tickets to Leopardstown. From Emma Keane, he says, Sheehan, your Extravision account has been suspended due to general cluelessness regarding movies.
Extravision shut down 2 days ago?
I think you understand his point. He's been, you know, facetious and sort of...
I take any slights on my film critique very, very seriously. I think that I take it as a personal slight.
Patrick Conway says, talking of horse racing, my ex-girlfriend was a jockey. Unfortunately, our relationship went off track and she left me saddled with debt. Total nightmare.
Okay. Yeah, I think
it's not bad.
I think the tickets are going to that particular punter.
No, I'm going to go for Extravision. I mean, failing, hopefully we get something better over the next little while. A couple of newspaper stories that we want to get into, Owen, that we're going to get to them in a second. Tommy is barking at me here. He wants me to get to Joe Schmidt video, so we're going to do that. This was from the press conference yesterday, Tommy, if I'm right, and the questions about Rory Best and Ian Henderson's appearance at the trial in Belfast.
So before we get the no comments out of the way, it's not about the trial, but I'm just wondering, did you give Rory Best permission to attend Belfast yesterday? Did you know about it?
I've got no comment on any of that. What's your view on his appearance at the court trial then?
We're not in a position to comment on any of that. It's a legal matter.
So I suppose in the team then, an awful lot of toing and froing between both McGrath and Healy in the Leinster squad lately. Why Healy this time around?
Yeah, sort of bizarrely there, a reporter decides to move the story on from what was really the story of the day as to why the Ireland captain had turned up at that trial yesterday. And obviously, as you would have expected, Joe Schmidt batted those away to say that he couldn't comment on the case. Now, obviously, the questions weren't exactly to do with the case that were due as to why the Ireland captain was there. It's going to be fascinating today to see whether Rory Best turns up. It's the traditional thing that the Ireland captain would turn up to the press conference today before an international match. So, in some ways, I'd be surprised almost if Rory Best does show up at that, because the inevitable questions are going to be there as they should be. We'll see. That's going to take place a little bit later today.
They were all pretty factual questions, nothing to do with a court case.
Nothing to do with the case per se. Now, I've sympathy for somebody who doesn't want to get drawn into the nuts and bolts of an ongoing significant case that involves one of their own employees. I totally get all of that, but as you say, there definitely are questions to be answered there as to why those players were at that. And in the grand scheme of things, if those questions are answered at some point down the track, then that's probably all right.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they are holding fire on a verdict and then they'll answer questions.
A couple of the stories that we want to get into this morning, Owen, are in relation to two significant media personalities who've been given two significant media gigs.
Yeah, the young people have been given a chance. Joanne Cantwell is the new Sunday Game presenter. She's interviewed by Mary Hannigan in the Irish Times, and a page previous to that, there's a guy called Joe Molloy who's been interviewed by Malachy Clerk in the Irish Times.
We should give viewers a look at the amazing photographs.
Yes. This is the picture of Joe right there in front of a pretty funky background. Yeah, nice, simple jumper. Kind of lets the background stand up. That's kind of what Joe does.
That's what Joe's all about. People, exactly. Yeah.
So this guy Joe Molloy, if you haven't really heard too much about him, but he says he works for a programme called Off the Ball. As
Kieran Shannon describes it in another feature piece in the Examiner this morning, it's a cute indie apparently. I mean, I wasn't aware of this, but I mean, in some ways that's quite nice.
It's the most indie
audience.
I'd say describing Joe as indie is probably the biggest compliment you could ever pay him. But he tells this anecdote that he tells in other articles. If you Google Joe Molloy interview or anything.
Shots fired by Owen Shane this morning. This is like...
It's a great Eamon Gilmore anecdote. The classic story where he's asked by a producer on a current affairs programme on News Talk to go and do a brief on Eamon Gilmore, or book Eamon Gilmore, I think. And he has to go and Google who Eamon Gilmore is, who at the time obviously would have been the leader of the Labour Party.
Might have been the Taoiseach.
I'm not sure what he'd been taught. He certainly would have been leader of the Labour Party at that time. I'm not sure what year it is. I haven't done that much research on this guy Joe Molloy. Yeah. But turns out, he didn't really know his current affairs. But he went home and he tells the story all the time. He went home every evening with his highlighter, highlighting all the newspaper articles and getting to know everybody in news and current affairs. Here's a nugget that actually isn't included in Clerkin's piece today, which Joe forgot to tell, is that he only got his first gig with Lunchtime on News Talk because Laura Whitmore had gone for an audition with MTV in the United Kingdom.
Oh, wow.
And that opened the door for somebody to freelance, somebody to intern for a while. And so he can very much thank the success of Laura Whitmore for that.
Outside of all this nonsense of poking fun at the guy, I think Joe's going to be amazing on the TV3 coverage. I have to say, it's going to be a real breath of fresh air. He's talking very openly, it has to be said, about how his sense of nervousness and apprehension about the entire thing. Yeah, it's really as it should be, but Joe is going to knock it out of the ballpark, and I can't wait to see the coverage, I have to say, over the weekend.
In fairness, very best of luck to Joe in all seriousness, and also as well, I think it's great news that Joanne Cantwell's got the Sunday Game gig.
That is a brilliant appointment.
Yeah, it is.
A fantastic appointment. Joanne is a brilliant broadcaster, a brilliant interrogator of facts, and brilliant at holding people to account, and that's exactly what's required in that role. I've been one of those people who grew up knowing nothing else than Michael Lister, and an institution, I'd say, probably is how you would describe Michael Lister's. Lester?
Yeah.
It's Michael Lister.
It's spelled L-Y-S-T. It's Michael. You're the only person I've ever heard pronounce it correctly. As Lister.
Really? I'm the only one who... Anyway, he's been a phenomenon. But Joanne is, I think, that an absolutely outstanding, and it's been swift. It's been a swift appointment, decisive and the absolute correct, indisputable, despite Buff Egan being, I think, 25-1 to get the gig, indisputable best and brilliant appointment, and best of luck to her.
I'm very much looking forward to the dynamic between her and Joe Brolly. And like, obviously Joe tends to meander, some would say very beautifully sometimes, into these...
Some would say that, yeah.
Yeah, other people, like people from Kerry, might say that he meanders cynically into certain other things. So I don't know, maybe challenging Joe on certain things is going to become a thing here, because Joanne obviously was brilliant on the morning coverage of the Olympics last year, when it was just the sheer volume of stuff that went wrong in Rio, with Michael Conlon's decision, with the previous boxing stuff that had happened before the Olympics, and then Pat Hickey.
Gift that kept on giving.
Every morning there was something, and I'd say obviously she made her name on a mainstream level before that. I think all of us would have known of her skills before then anyway.
Joanne leaving F104 gave me my break. That was the sort of... That's why I'm eternally grateful to her.
That's even better than Laura Whitmore leaving to give Joe Molloy his break, isn't it?
Ger Loughnane just very briefly writes about the state of Clare hurling in the Star this morning. A couple of interesting pieces, including Kieran Cunningham with Stephen Colvert, but just to touch on that one. And he talks about the retirement of recent players from a Clare point of view, the likes of Callan Ryan, Dark Conor Ryan, who'd retired for very different reasons, Patrick Donnellan and Brendan Bugler as well, and just says that maybe actually some of those players could have stayed on if the atmosphere was right. Clare haven't played at Croke Park, he points out, since 2013, since the All-Ireland.
Isn't it?
Unbelievable, that was astounding. But this is a really strong cut at Davy. Davy is not mentioned over the course of the piece. It's also a very strong cut at the joint managers Donald Maloney and Jerry O'Connor, who I think end of 2016, if I'm right, they'd started, so 2017, so they've 1 year under their belt. But he talks about the long video sessions, which made training very, very long. Everybody knew this in Clare. He says the training session went on for hours and had the effect of deadening the players completely.
Well, that was Brendan Bugler's complaint.
That's what he said. That's how he gets into the piece, and said that it was a common... Everybody in Clare essentially knew this thing was happening. He said that the Clare players there at the minute should be at their peak, but has been an unconscious withdrawal of effort, is how he puts it. Like, it's very much on the motivational side that they're lacking in a bit of motivation. And I mean, a Clare team in need of motivation on who you're going to call.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's it Bill Murray?
There we go again. It's about that notion of pre-programmed players as well. And I think that the whole Jim McGuinness era in football has certainly changed hurling to the idea, well, you have one plan and you instigate that one plan, and if you follow that through perfectly, you're going to be fine. Whereas if you look a bit deeper into Jim McGuinness' stuff, it was setting them up with a plan that was malleable and that was able to change mid-game, just like Jim Gavin instructs
empowerment. He talks a lot about Jim Gavin, been at the coaching conference at Croke Park a couple of weeks ago, and Jim Gavin talking about empowering the players, and his sense is that the Clare players aren't empowered. And
then lastly, very briefly, it's just Martha Kellner's piece on that IOC decision, which is, or the CIS decision I should say, rather, in The Guardian today, which is excellent. Kellner's been on top of all this stuff over the last couple of years, and as I say, the IOC's actions before were essentially appeasement up until this point, where an official decision was made that a life ban was almost seen as a stopgap, as ridiculous as that sounds. As I said at the top of the show, this proves that life bans are completely unenforceable and clean athletes are 100% the victim here. And the thing about this verdict, which I found remarkable, and I didn't know until reading this piece, is that the Court of Arbitration for Sport did not even look at systematic doping when it came to this. They didn't consider that as evidence. They didn't really consider the state-led, Mutko, Putin-led, state-sponsored doping in Sochi 2014. It was a case-by-case basis. Well, I'm sorry, if you're ignoring the most compelling evidence we've seen in a doping story since Floyd Landis, then I don't really know what you're really doing in this case.
They don't consider systematic doping as a rule, or
on the individual basis, they don't. I don't know for what reason. It would be very interesting to get Jim Walden's take on this and whether or not that was agreed from the outset. But even without that,
it's pretty compelling either way. That would have been the essence. I mean, the conversation we had with Jim Walden last week, I never for a second thought that this was going to be the outcome of that case.
Not for a second. It just seems so compelling, as you say. But then the compelling evidence is from the state-sponsored doping.
20 past 8 this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. We're with you until 9 AM or thereabouts. Upcoming, we're going to be speaking to Kevin Kilbane very shortly about the transfer window. He's also at Liverpool Spurs this weekend, so we're going to get his thoughts on all of that good stuff. And Keith Wood as well is going to join us in studio. He's got a very special gift for the Off the Ball studios. We're going to definitely put him through his paces about that particular gift and have some reflections on it too. If you're a fan of the 97 Lions, you might want to hang around for it. But before all of that, Keith has been busy man this week. He's been out and about. He's been chatting to Lawrence Dallaglio, speaking life, rugby and everything else yesterday. Here's a little bit of a taster. There's full piece to come later on, but a bit of a taster here on Lawrence Dallaglio's Six Nations predictions.
And if we fast forward to this tournament that's coming up, what's your prediction?
It's going to be the closest Six Nations we've had for quite some time. I don't think England will win it. Well, I really don't think England will win it. I think Ireland will win it. I'm not saying that because I'm sat next to you or I'm in Dublin. I'm saying that because it's such a hard tournament to win, and England have won it twice in a row. Ireland won it twice in a row before them, and Wales twice in a row before them. And no team has won 3 Six Nations tournaments. We've talked about the injuries that England have. Yes, of course they have strength in depth. They have a big pool of players, but they really do have big injuries to some key players. So I think it'll be close. If you take Italy's results away from the tournament, and I don't wish to do that, but sometimes you have to, just because they've still got a wee bit to catch up, although Conor O'Shea will bridge that gap. There was only one away win in the whole tournament last year, and that was by England in Wales with a try in the last minute of the game. So winning away from home is at a premium. England won the tournament last year by losing to Ireland. My prediction this year is that Ireland will win the tournament, and they may even lose to England. But I do think they'll end up as champions, because right here, right now, they're playing the best rugby. They have everyone fit and fresh, and they just look in good shape to win the competition.
Yeah, that's Off the Balls. Keith Wood in conversation with Lawrence Dallaglio, and I'm delighted to say that we are joined by the man himself. Keith, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
You don't mind being described as Off the Balls Keith Wood, I'm assuming?
That's absolutely fine. Right. Yeah, that's cool in the gang.
That full piece is going out, I believe, later on. You had a good half-hour sit-down with the man.
Yeah, he was in great form actually yesterday, Lawrence, and he gets as excited with these sort of tournaments as I do myself, which is, he's good.
We're going to get into these sort of tournaments very shortly, but you have brought in an amazing gift for us, because we're trying to encourage everybody that comes in to give us a little bit of something that's important to them. Like the benchmark has been set with Conor Murray's boots that are behind you there from the lines.
There was a bit of a smell actually when I came in. I think
that's just all on, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But you've brought us in this. Let me see if we can get the. Have I got it right? Let's go this way. So this is a poster, if we can get the focus. There we go. 4 good reasons to pick up a rugby ball and run very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So this landed in the office, Keith. So this is the 97 Lions Tour to South Africa, and it landed in the office during the week. And I thought, that's an interesting photograph of 4 of the Irish Lions from the South African Tour. And then I looked it up, and there weren't any other Irish Lions on the South African Tour. That was it.
It was the 4,
I was really surprised about that.
Kind of reflective of Ireland's status, I think, at that stage. And
I'm going to leave that down.
And it was a bit of a surprise. That was an ad that the IRFU did afterwards when we came back. I even remember that photograph. I think it was
really.
I think it was Billy.
Where did you?
Stickland took
you got it done here before you went off?
No, that was down on the beach in Umschlanger Rocks in Durban, and we were to try and look arrogant. So there you go. So was
that a look that came
well, I have to say it suited me fine, because it got rid of my double chin, so I was kind of looking up.
You're looking sort of wistfully into the distance.
Wistfully or imperious, or I don't know what.
We're gonna find a nice little spot for it somewhere around here.
Well, you need it, That's,
no, it's great.
The studio is fantastic, by the way. It's brilliant.
Another thing that stood out for me when I started digging into the 97 Tour and the 4 Irish Lions that were on the tour, none of them were playing for Irish provinces at the time. We had no Irish provincial players on that 97 Tour.
No, and actually previous to that, like we see Paul Wallace there in the middle of that, he wasn't picked originally.
The Claw got injured.
But the Claw was picked playing for Queensland at the time.
Right.
So, and he turned up to the training session and couldn't run.
On day 1 he got injured.
It was almost entertaining. His back wasn't great. He thought it would be fine, but he kept falling over in training.
Right. And then at that point Paul Wallace comes in and
totally from nowhere really, and Jason Leonard took him under his wing, and Wally listened to everything that he was told, and Wally got picked ahead
started
of him.
all 3 tests.
And we were like, Wally was about 16 stone at the time. I was about 17 and a half, nearly 18 stone. Tom Smith was 16 stone. The guys opposite us were, Oz Durant was 21 and a half stone. Naka Drotsky was 19 and a half stone. Right. And Adrian Garvey was 19 and a half. They're huge. Yeah. And Wally myself and Tom were kind of, like Tom was a couple of inches shorter than me. Myself and Wally are the same sort of 6 foot height. The guys were huge. Yeah. We just went low. And Wally did an incredible job. I mean, absolutely. And Oz Durant, who was at that stage just, the business. But we kind of made them a bit uncomfortable. We were a bit too low. Used their weight against them, maybe.
Martin Johnson described him as his player of the tournament afterwards, which was incredible for a guy who only got drafted into the last minute.
Yeah, I thought Wally was incredible. I actually thought Jeremy Davidson was incredible.
Yeah. And another guy who got a lucky break, right? There was an injury to Doddy Weir at some point over the warm-up games.
Well, that's the nature of a Lions tour. You get a chance, can you take the chance? But he was, and for me, he was extraordinary because I was having huge trouble with my lineouts at that stage, and I had a bad shoulder, couldn't practice as much as I'd like to. My throw was not a natural throw. I mean, it was staccato. It just wasn't good. He could have picked any ball I threw to him. A dead duck I'd throw to him, he'd catch it. He was phenomenal. And I remember there was one match, he caught 3 balls one-handed just by grabbing the ball like that, which was kind of amazing, But it was great. I mean, it's funny because I was just looking through the stuff, what was appropriate to bring down during the week, and this was gathering dust. I tried to clean it. I didn't do a great job.
You've done a great job.
I didn't do a great job before, to be honest now. But
so here, just in terms, you were struggling with the lineouts. Was that injury related, or was it?
An awful lot of it was injury related. I had a huge job. I broke my shoulder when I sat on the bench for Ireland when I was 20, and the week after I dislocated my shoulder in a game against Dungannon. And I was out, I had surgery, I was out for a year, and I came back. It wasn't right when I came back. The surgery I had wasn't very successful. It kept causing me a bit of hassle, and then it went again in '95 in the World Cup, and I had a posterior dislocation, which is very rare. So my arm went out through my back, so it's a really nasty injury. And it took me 15, 16 months to get back to play. After that, it was a kind of triple surgery.
To get back at all?
To get back to play, yeah. Right. And so there was a couple of the surgeons I'd seen had said it's time to retire. And I was 23, you don't want to retire. And I found a great surgeon, Bailey, in London. And he said, no, you'll play, you'll be fine. You'll hurt though. And, he was like, for me now, he was my guru for the rest of my career, and I had a few other operations. I think in total I've had 12 on my shoulder, 11 on my shoulder, 1 on my elbow. But in all that period of time, every time I came back from one of the surgeries, I was totally confident that it was fine. He was an amazing guy, almost as a mind guy as opposed to the carpentry in my shoulder, But it was so it was difficult at times, and it got. I changed my throw during that tour. I can remember it. I used to hold the ball with 2 hands in the front, and by the end of that tour I was holding it behind my head. So it had taken me that level of confidence to try and get there. And I'd had an operation 6 or 7 weeks, 2 operations, 6 weeks and 12 weeks before that Lions tour. So I was trying to get my arm stable, to try and go. And it was,
so you couldn't actually lift your hands above your head due to the...
No, I could, but it was the security. I was confident there with the ball, and I wasn't that confident that I could stand from here and throw it. So I was having to go from there to there to there. And of course, as I pulled it back, their guys were going up in the air. So I was trying to thread a needle, and it just affects your confidence. You're trying to do it. It's your job, and you have to do it. I struggled with it manfully, to be honest. And it wasn't really until about, I'd say 99, 2000, where I just got my head right about it, that I could trust my shoulders and be able to throw the ball. And it doesn't mean I won every line out after it, but my stats...
That was 4 years after the very initial one, is that right?
After the first operation, I'd say 7 years nearly, but the big one in 95. So at that stage, I just had the sense of confidence that I could actually do it. But in the middle of that was strange things. I lost my spin. I couldn't spin the ball at one stage. I couldn't figure out why.
From the throw or generally?
No, I was just throwing the ball. It was just going like a ball, like a soccer throw. There was no spin on the ball. And I realised it took 2 goes, maybe not the sharpest tool in the box. It took 2 matches to figure out that actually I'd strapped my arm because I'd had a bad bang on my forearm. And the rotation comes from there for the spin on the ball. And I had that fully strapped because I was hurt, I couldn't actually rotate it. So once I took the strapping off, it was back again, you know.
And here, like, how does that stuff does it get inside your head? Because I mean,
totally.
Does it?
Totally, yeah.
Like to a yip situation almost, or?
Oh, we played in the World Cup in '99. This is where I can remember the days, right? So in '99 we played against Australia in Lansdowne Road. I threw unbelievably well, and I lost 4 lineouts. I could have lost every lineout. John Eales was magic. The Australian lineout was incredible. They literally, they were an inch away from every lineout ball, which terrified me. So even though we won 12 or 13 lineouts, I lost 4. I could have lost 12 or 13, and it actually shook my confidence. I said, and I thought I was throwing well, and I'm throwing well, and I'm losing them. I mean, what the hell? And we'd had a sports psychologist that had come in earlier in the year, and I can't remember his name, and I wasn't very keen on him anyway. But he'd said one thing that struck a chord, which was kind of like a Happy Gilmore thing, which is kind of find a place where you're confident and use a trigger word or series of words to get back to that if you're feeling very low, which is a good idea. Yeah. Hard in practice, but a good idea. And once you spend a bit of time doing it and concentrating on it and feeling buoyant and confident and capable that you're able to do it, okay, that's good. And the first lineout I threw in that dreadful day against Argentina in Lens, I threw it to a guy I don't throw to that often, and it was picked off. And I went into total panic.
Right.
And so I'm on the field in panic, speaking my little happy place mantra to myself. And if the camera had panned on me, I'm talking to myself for the next 2 minutes. While I'm running, trying to tackle people, trying to play the game, chatting to myself like slightly psycho. And I won the next 16 out of 16 lineouts. And actually that sorted it for me. And it just meant, actually, I knew I could get out of the panic. There was anxiety there, and I knew I could actually get out of that in that situation if it happened again. And by having that in, just knowing I had the safety blanket, it actually meant my throwing improved. I felt far more relaxed.
What are you saying to yourself?
Something good is going to happen.
That was it?
Was the phrase, yeah. And it just took the pressure off me. And it's interesting, and I dabble in the psychology stuff from reading some of the books and stuff like that. And actually, if you look at Bob Rotella in golf, and actually some of the golf is not a game of perfect, or it's a game of confidence, all those books, he talks about elements of those. And I've been lucky enough to play golf with some of the guys that he has written chapters about. And it's their way of how to deal with doing something bad. How do they then do the next thing right? And it was a great thing to learn, but it actually, in terms of, it was like a salve onto my anxiety. So the next time I went to play, it just didn't mean I was going to win everyone, but I just wasn't worried about it. It makes a big difference.
Were Telfer and McGeechan big into the psychological nature of things in the '97 tour? Because you even read the media reports in the lead up to the tour, and it seemed that everybody was like, oh, the Lions are coming down to South Africa, they're just here for a party, don't worry about them. If they get the win, it's a bonus. I'm sure that sort of stuff would have been used for positive psychological stuff. Yeah, there was
a bit of that. I remember actually saying it, that I used to do a lot of visualisation, and I remember the guy said, no, you don't. I said, well, I do. And they said, well, no, you've never mentioned it before. Well, I haven't mentioned it before, but how would you know that I'm not? And I'd sit down and, again, visualise how you do certain things in certain parts of the field or in certain situations. And then by the time I finished playing, I was doing that in the game. So if you're standing on the touchline when their hooker's throwing it in, and so I'd go through it very quickly in my head. If he throws to the front, I'm going to do this. If he throws it to the middle, if he throws it to the back, I do nothing. And just kind of see it before it happens, and then you react a little bit faster. And there are all those things that you're trying to do as a sportsman. McGeechan was different. He would do a motivation, but he wouldn't do it in a fashion where it would be kind of psych you up. I think he got us all in the same mind, which was amazing. Telfer was a perfect guy for forwards. The backs would never be able to really deal with Telfer. He was mad as a brush, and brilliant though, but technically brilliant. So that when you train, you suddenly started training in exactly the way everybody started doing at the same time. So we all got to do things by repetition, which is the key, and to any skills. But to try and get everybody put together in a short period of time, it was great. I mean, we'd have killed him if we were there for another week. We were wrecked. Really, we were wrecked by the end of it. Yeah. But it was worth it, like absolutely worth it.
Yeah. Everyone
I met him recently.
Did you? Yeah?
He hasn't changed at all.
Everyone feels they know the 97 lines inside out. Like I remember being at college and having the cassette tape.
Yeah.
And this was currency. Like everybody wanted to get the cassette to watch this thing. It was the first time that we got a look behind the sort of the curtain of these things. But it kind of struck me actually, just talking about that psychological aspect, that the two lads were probably way ahead of their time in that regard, because almost everything they were doing was tapping into that sort of psychology of the motivational aspect, and there weren't YouTube clips around then. You talk about Bob Rotella, and I know Brian O'Driscoll has talked about it before, that when he went to a small bit of a slump at some point in his career, he looks up a lot of YouTube clips and doing stuff that I do well, that point that you make, but he didn't exactly have YouTube back in 97.
No, and it's funny, we had one of the girls outside, Marianne, is in there. We had a CD made for ourselves, and it was a piece of music that we liked, and we would say 5 things that we believed to be true about ourselves and 5 things that we wished were true, and we would say the ones that we wished as if they were true. Right. It's a really good idea, and I did mine to So Long Marianne by Leonard Cohen.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, what a tune!
I was laughing when I met Marianne outside, and it was, again, we were, like, everybody was just you're trying to get whatever, you just want to get better all the time, and it's then you're saying these things, or you're hearing your own voice. So we recorded our voice speaking over the song.
That's class.
And so you're listening, going to a game, things that you're saying about yourself.
It's a pretty emotional tune as well. Like it's.
Well, I like Leonard Cohen. I don't think you can read too much into the music. I liked it, and it was a bit of fun.
It's time that we began to talk about the Six Nations.
Absolutely. It's a good paraphrasing.
Listen, we've got a bunch of comments coming in. Do keep them coming in at #OTBAM, or drop a comment into the Facebook page. We've got a very neat prize as well to send somebody away for a weekend pass to Leopardstown for the best comment so far. So keep them coming in. One from Neil here. Woody's an absolute warrior. My old fella always told me to watch him play and do what he does on the pitch. I failed. Winky face, says Neil there. We haven't had you in to talk about the team since it was named, so maybe let's get into some of that. And James Ryan particularly was one of the kind of interesting selections that I wanted to focus on initially. Comparisons with Paul O'Connell was one thing that was made by Sean O'Brien during the week, who said that he expected this guy to be better than Paul O'Connell. We're always trying to manage expectations of young players coming through, a 21-year-old second row. Comparisons like that probably aren't all that helpful, but this guy does seem like he's a star on the rise.
I remember being asked on the BBC a good few years ago about Gary Ringrose, and they said, is he the new Brian O'Driscoll? And I said, no, he's the new Gary Ringrose. So I don't go in for those things at all, and I think it's I know it's the nature of this game and of everything that we have to do, that you try and go for the closest comparative and say that this is the guy, or this is the guy we want him to emulate or surpass, or whatever it is. I'm really impressed with him, the way he plays. And I said it during the week that I'm a little bit surprised he's picked.
Because the experience thing.
No, it's not actually. I think this could be a physically very tough game, and he's a young guy. That's not a criticism at all, actually. I think he deserves his place in the team. I just want to make, I'm hoping that we manage him properly for the first couple of years, because you don't want him to be. I want him for the next 13 or 14 years in an Ireland jersey. That's the way you have to look at it. So that's the comparison, as opposed to a player. You just know that he has got the skills and the qualities and the work ethic and the mind that wants to get there and do all that work. He's shown all the signs of that so far. So for that, it's brilliant, and so I think he's been nothing but quality all the time. Yeah. He makes a few mistakes. But for big guys, body position is very good going into contact. Good line out forward, just very capable. And it's a huge vote of confidence to pick him for an away match. Away matches are so tough in the Six Nations. We kind of gloss over that every now and then. Actually, Lawrence came up with a comment yesterday. If you take away the Italian results, there was only one win away last year in the Six Nations. That was England in Wales. And it is an issue. It is hard. It is very, very difficult. But look, I think he's class, and I just managed properly means, yeah, you play him here and you play him, and he may get a week off, and you'll play him again, and that's would be perfect. And not. No, I would always say the coaches know best, so they'll have. He'll have been tested. They'll know how resilient he is. They'll know what he's able to do, and they're obviously comfortable with it, and that's fair enough.
I think Liam Toland was making the point in the Irish Times this morning that Ireland conceded 6 tries off the defensive line out in the Six Nations last year. Does that stat really represent a problem?
I don't think it does. And actually, I was watching the Champions Cup for the last few weeks and listening to some of the commentators complaining about Leinster going up in the air. They're taking a calculated punt, and in some cases that may lead to a try for the opposition, but it may also lead to a steal, and it's how they balance those up. You can't do everything all at once, and you're playing against good teams, and this fits into it. So I think they will pick and choose when they want to do it. If you knew, and here's a simple example, if you knew that Ireland were afraid of being pushed over from a line out, and they weren't going to put anybody up in the air, you could throw the ball lower, right? You know, just to make certain that it's right and perfect. Get your setup really, really secure without having to go to the highest height. So that's fine. You think that's happening. Suddenly Peter O'Mahony is thrown 9 feet in the air in front of the ball. You've lost the ball. You know, so it's all guessing and counter guessing and managing what your percentages are in different positions. So I remember we used to get criticised at times for we lose a ball maybe at the back of the line out, but it was the best place to play from. Probably an easy enough throw, and not with people, 2 guys up in front of the ball. It was a great one to do. People say, because that's a much harder throw. It isn't actually harder, it's easier. So it's trying to look at it in that idea, try to think of what's going through the heads of both of them, as opposed to making a comment that, you know, we're not good at that. Ireland are good in that position. It's what they choose to do at particular periods of time.
It's probably fair to say that they're not going to take that risk early on against France, and I think Joe Schmidt has talked a lot about the opening 20 minutes. We saw what happened to Scotland.
Yeah, and that can happen too. But look, one thing we know about Joe Schmidt teams is that he has analysed everything to death. Now, he'll be driven to distraction by having a new coach with new players and not really having seen them play before. But, you know, he'll still have all the relevant information in there. And Brunel will do something different, something that hasn't been done by France in the past, because he'll want to keep guys checking.
One of the other interesting things is the front row, and I was actually driving around the other week listening to yourself and Liam Toland dissecting the front row. I think it might have been it was the Munster game when it was dead and buried, and we had a good you had a good sort of chew
random
it was
chat,
brilliant.
I'd say.
But he goes from McGrath here in the front row as opposed to Healy, which was sort of the opposite almost of the 2 big games in the November internationals, where it was Healy who kind of got the nod. Now, who knows what's going on in the background with all this sort of stuff, but I know Leo Cullen has said about McGrath particularly that he's got his head in the game now and he's very focused. What's your take on that? Is it a kind of a horses for courses thing, or?
Do you know, I'm sitting in here saying, God, I actually thought he picked Healy.
So did I.
Has he gone for Healy? Well, that's maybe my bad then. Yeah.
I actually haven't checked the official. Like the Rory and Jerry Thornley teams were all started Cian Healy.
Yeah, no, it's
maybe I've got that back to front. What's your
Cian Healy?
It is Cian Healy.
There you go. God, I thought I was going mad.
Flip that question.
I would have gone with Healy, and I would go with Healy because he shed a bit of weight. He looks energetic. He needs to make certain his discipline stays in check, and he absolutely has to do that. But I think McGrath played an awful lot of rugby in the last couple of years, and I think the Lions took a bit out of him.
Did it, yeah?
And I think that does happen. And so certain guys go on the Lions tour and they haven't played a huge amount of rugby, and they come back from it. And actually, yes, it was very hard and very taxing physically and mentally, but do you know what? I don't have a huge miles on the clock in the last 12 months. I'm fine. Some don't. It takes a bit longer to come back from it. So he was a bit slower coming back. But let's not write him off. How great we are to have a situation to have the 2 of those guys. One who is and has been kind of on the top of his game this year. Another one who hasn't, but who's coming back to it, playing really well. And a lot of guys then down in Munster who are trying to get into that subs jersey as well. And so there's great pressure there and great depth in it. So I'm not worried about those, because the conversation has changed as well on the first 15. Because you still want to be the guy that can finish out the game at the end. So it's just
the finishers.
I mean,
you buy into the finishers.
Like at our time, honestly, if you were not playing, you'd be unbelievably upset. And But that's pride, maybe. And that pride is kind of, I'm not saying that that's changed, but there is more of a sense of a team being 23 and maybe more than that, actually, than there is being 15.
On that note, is Cronin, I mean, close to best now, do you think? Is it the gap seems to have narrowed a bit?
I think Cronin is playing, he's back playing better. He really is. It comes down to lineouts. We were talking about it earlier on, and he still needs to sharpen his lineouts up a little bit more. I think they've got better, and I think they're very close. But I also think, it's a horrible thing to have to say that you're Ole Gunnar on the bench, but he's lethal when he comes off the bench because the guys are a little bit more tired, and his acceleration through a gap is phenomenal. You know, so I think he's a cracking rugby player actually, and whether he's the guy that should be the finisher.
Does that make you a little bit surprised that Andrew Porter didn't make the bench then? I know John Ryan obviously brings probably better scrummaging, is that fair to say? But in terms of that, I suppose that dynamism and when the game opens up in the last 20 minutes, we saw what Andrew Porter could do.
I'm not surprised.
Sure.
And I'm unbelievably surprised that he has been selected for an international already. That's an amazing thing at his age in that position. He's a guy we're going to mind too, you know. And I don't know that you want him in Paris in the first match up, coming off it and suddenly coming against some wizened French prop that could turn you inside out, and there's no running around the field that works. He's still starting and getting there, but he's a guy. I mean, I can't get over between him and James Ryan. They're the two guys that I get really excited by because I think they're guys that are there for 10 years, 10, 12 years. You know, I think that's fantastic. So there's no rush with him. And John Ryan's a hard, nuggety player. I mean, he's improved out of sight in the last couple of years. He really has. And he's a better scrummager.
Now that we've put Cian Healy back in the team, let's have a quick... We're going to get your thoughts on the 10s battle as well, Keith, but we just want to take a quick clip here. CJ Stander, who was talking during the week about France's rookie, 19-year-old out half.
I think, look, if he's good enough and he gets a chance and he can grab it, you know, it's in fairness, it's great for him to back him and let him play. Now, I think he's an exciting player and he brings a lot when he plays for his club, you know, so looking forward to playing against him.
CJ, have you talked about maybe protecting Johnny given what happened the last time? Because there's been an awful lot of talk about the last game coming into this one.
I think Johnny's a big boy. He can look after himself. You know, I think he showed that over the last few years, and every time we played against him and with him, you know, he looks after himself. I think we all have jobs, you know, but as a collective, we're going to work hard to look after each other because we're an Irish side that want to go out and play our game and make sure that everyone is, I'd say, looked after.
Yeah, CJ Stander talking there during the week. I'm assuming, Keith, that he is running down Jalibert's channel in a pretty big way pretty quickly.
I think to be rude not to, you know, and you have to try and introduce young players to international rugby as a team that picks them, but also as a team that's picked against them. And I think it was very interesting. Santandré said that he thinks that there was a lost generation of players, of young guys that were in France that didn't get an opportunity to play at the clubs because of the foreign guys that were in there. Interesting, we'd been saying that for years, you know, bemoaning that fact, and it's interesting to hear a French coach then after he's out of the job come back and then say it. So they have to start somewhere. They have to start bringing guys through, and Jalibert is good, fast, again capable, really good guy. 19 years of age, that's tough. I'll go back 28 years and 18 years. God, I'm not that old. And I was just trying to figure out if I was going to put Driscoll at 48. He's aging very heavily. Draco is 20 years of age, scored a hat-trick in Paris. So let's not get too excited by that a guy can go and do something special on a big day like that. For me, against a lot of teams, I think he might, I'm not saying get away with it, but he's going to be playing against a 10 that is very disciplined, very organised, very capable. The pressure will be relentless. I don't expect Ireland to give up too many mistakes, so I think he'll do some brilliant things. He absolutely will, because that's in his nature, Jalibert. But Can you sustain that for 60, 70 minutes? That becomes very difficult when you're building it around that guy. So, look, I think I wouldn't read too much into it. My view is that they're looking at changing the French team entirely over a 2-year period.
And that they can suck up the results in the meantime almost?
I think they will, because the results have been poor anyway, trying to play in the stodgy fashion that they've played.
At least if there's a bit of progression then.
I think so. So if they can do that over 2 years with a view for having a good showing in the World Cup in Japan. But this is a guy at 19 that in 6 years' time, or in 2023, 5 years' time, he'll be he'll be 25, absolutely in his prime and organised, and there'll be a lot of other guys with it. So I think they're building for next year's World Cup, but they're also building for their home World Cup in 2023.
A couple of quick questions fly through here from comments that have come in for us from Ed Renison here. He says, on lineouts and Schmidt, is he vulnerable to things like quick lineouts and quick penalties because he plays such a rigid, structured game?
No, because the discipline that is inherent in it is to be in the position for quick lineouts, to be in the position for variation. And look, all these coaches are analysing everything beyond all things. So of course, if someone does something that you've absolutely never seen before, that could be great. Yeah. I mean, in my time, which I remember, just to show you levels of complication, we had 250 lineouts back in 2001, and what we used to do at that stage was pick a suite of ones that we'd use for one match, use another one for another we thought was suited. We didn't kind of use them all the time, so you would try and keep them guessing from one match to the next and not do them. So there was the one I scored the try against England in 2001. That was a lineup we'd used 3 years before, and we hadn't used it since. We practiced it once that week. We practiced it in the warm-up, and that was the one we used. So nobody knew where to go.
Tomas on Periscope here says the French will run at Ireland ball in hand. Ireland and Leinster teams always struggle against these teams. Does Keith think that Ireland will struggle if the French just stick to ball in hand and run at Ireland?
I would say Ireland's defence in the last couple of years has been phenomenal. We drift off a little bit when our attention isn't right, and we started poorly in the last 2 Six Nations. If we start poorly and don't get our energy level up and our attitude exactly right to meet the battle in the first minute, we do struggle in that, absolutely. But because we failed in the last 2 slow starts in the last couple of years, I actually just don't think we're going to do that this time. And we watching Leinster's defensive and Munster's defensive performance over the last few matches has been pretty impressive.
It gives a lot of hope, all right. Like, especially after being down there and seeing the Dallaglio piece yesterday, I'm unbelievably excited for the start of the Six Nations, but not only because it's that usual annual hype for it, also because I think the standard is really high in terms of this being the best competition in the world. I think you can actually safely say that. And Liam Toland was saying this morning that he's not sure the All Blacks would win the Six Nations. Do you agree with that?
It's an interesting kind of one that's thrown out there. I love this competition for the fact of the tradition, for the fact it isn't home and away. You can't get another chance to rectify a mistake you've made. If you've lost against England, you don't play against them for another 12 months. Live with that. And that's that kind of attitude is great. The All Blacks, it's relentless. Look, the All Blacks would adjust to whatever they had to.
Sure.
They're still, there's a good distance between them and the other teams. I think it's interesting to see that the northern teams, England and Ireland in particular, are much further up the tree and much closer to New Zealand than they have been in the past, but New Zealand are still stand out on their own. So
I think the All Blacks would blitz. I mean, they would win the Six Nations. I mean, is that...
Well, I think Toland's point, to be fair, is not to do with the comparative quality, it's to do with the relentless nature of the Six Nations.
Relentless nature and also the style. So, yes, New Zealand can turn up on a day and play a particular style, and they've done that. But the things that they struggled with on the lines, I think they may struggle with having to try and do that 2 or 3 weeks in the trot.
Before we plough you with some of the comments that have come in about your absence from people's TVs now over the Six Nations, I just want to get a quick thought on the bench, because I think a lot of people were not expecting but hopeful that maybe Jordan Larmour might actually feature in the 15. He doesn't make the 23. To be fair to Ferguson McFadden, obviously he's in the form of his life at the minute. And if he doesn't make the 23 now, you almost think that his international career is done. But I mean, by the same token, it would have been nice to have got a glimpse of this guy the weekend.
Well, I'd like to have seen him there, but I think, much as we talked about Andrew Porter, I think the same holds true for Larmour, that maybe this isn't the place just to
hold fire a while.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're going to see both of those players play in a couple of weeks' time. I think that is part and parcel of it. Yeah, you would like to see it because he's exciting, and we're all fans. You know, there's no way around that fact. We're looking at it. God, we really want to see him play. Joe's pragmatic, you know, and we don't agree always with what he says and does, but that's fine. That's his job, and his job is to try and get the results and to do it, not to kind of be nice to us and give us exactly what we want, which is like a talent like that getting a chance to play. I want to see him on a hard pitch. I know for myself that he'd terrorise you. You know, as a forward, I'd hate to see him running at me. I just wouldn't like, you know, because he's got this total lateral step that you're kind of guessing, and you're saying, well, I'm going to give him one shoulder, and he's gone on the other shoulder, and you're half turned, and you're just made to look like an idiot.
You're there talking to yourself, saying something good is going to come.
I kept that to the lineouts because you can't be doing that. You can't dilute that down. You know,
something good is going to come, and he's going to step past you.
I like the only one I could see as a comparison. They're very different players and do very different things. Was Billy Whiz, was Jason Robinson, and Jason used to do this little kind of. It wasn't a power step that Larmour does, but it was like in this space he'd confuse you.
He'd have turned 4 times before he even got near you.
It isn't even the turning. You're just absolutely racked with doubt as to where he's going. So, and you like a little bit of certainty. So you're in a position, you have him, you have it lined up. That's great. I'm sorted. And suddenly there's a little skip in there, and you fresh air. And he may have jumped back, which he used to do, which was quite embarrassing. Where you're just lying on the ground and you haven't laid a hand on him, and you're feeling like a prat.
One flavour of the general sentiment that's coming in, and I'm going to read this one out from Kieran O'D for Keith. It won't be the same watching the TV coverage without Keith. Always great to hear his views, but enjoy watching the Six Nations relaxing at home. You deserve it, he says.
I'm looking forward to it, actually. It's been
something different for you?
Yeah, it's been a long time. So 92 or 93 was when I kind of started in the Ireland squad. And that's my head was around Six Nations from then, so it was work, if you'd call it work. I never really did, but and from that, and then for all the Six Nations with the BBC afterwards, which I loved actually, and for me it was a great crutch. So I stopped playing rugby. I stopped at 31. My body was broken, but I was happy to stop, and I stopped under my own steam, which was kind of nice. Then I go into another team in the BBC, and they were brilliant because you're still doing something that you love, and which was really nice. And then that comes to a natural end too. You know, when they lost the rights to the Ireland game, and I'm going to Cardiff in Ireland or in Dublin, that's not what I wanted either. So the idea to be able to say, well, actually, I'm also taking time off because I've got 3 young boys. I want to be at home a little bit more too, and it's kind of
nice to watch some of the games with them as well.
Well, it is. Yeah. You know, they love rugby too, so it's interesting. Analysing games with my kids, you know. So it was funny.
I sit down and do some halftime analysis.
I tell you, they're sharp enough too, you know, and argumentative as well, as you'd expect. And yeah, it's good fun. But it's funny. I was at a match recently. I think I said this the other day. I was at a match and I was chatting to one of the guys, and there was a woman sitting behind me. She said, "Could you just speak up a little, please?" Which was kind of cool, you know. Yeah. So, I'm like, I love it. So, and I actually have to say it, in the last year, I've actually got to, I think rugby has changed in the last year. I think it's become more exciting. I think the law variations have been of benefit to the competition, to all competitions. And I think there's a couple more that need to go, but I just think it looks like a great game. Like in stark contrast, I think, to 12 months ago, in the way the game was. It seemed to be bigger last year, more grunt. Now it seems more about invention, and so it's more enjoyable. And I've actually kind of re-engaged with the game as a fan again, which is nice.
Well, we'll also be able to get your thoughts every Wednesday night and off the ball as well. So we're definitely looking forward to that. Keith, thanks a million for the gift.
Of course,
it's going up. We're going to find a place for it this afternoon. Thanks a million for coming into us.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Keith Wood, as always, brilliant to have you in the studio. Hopefully you'll come back and see us again. Right, we're going to talk football in just a minute, and to lead us there, Jim White, of all people, Mr. Transfer Window himself, joined what turns out to be fanboys Nathan Murphy and Kevin Kilbane on the show last night.
Jim, sorry, I just thought it's funny to ask you with that. I know you say that you're getting a lot of information. How quickly can you make that judgment call that this is actually legitimate, or this is just someone that's throwing something out here that needs me to actually give them a mention or something? How quickly can you actually take this all in and then make that judgment call going into it then?
Well, I mean, it's all down to who you trust, Kevin, and who you might think, right, I better check that one out before I go with it. I mean, I remember on a transfer deadline day some years ago, in a commercial break, I looked at my phone, it was ringing, it said Redknapp, and it wasn't Jamie, it was Harry. So you've got about 3 minutes of a commercial break, and at that time it was all kicking off. And I said to Harry, how are you doing? And Harry at that time was the manager of Tottenham. And he was like, hello, Jim, it's going fine. You know, you're busy, aren't you? I'm like, yeah, I'm really busy, Harry. Get to the point. And he did. And he just said, okay, I'll just be brief with you, but Robbie Keane is on his way up to Glasgow. He's going to join Celtic on loan. And I thought, oh my God, right, okay. So, I mean, as soon as they came back to me, I virtually there and then just went for it. I didn't quote Harry as my source at the time, but I just said, let me just tell you, a huge story brewing, and Celtic, well, Celtic fans in Scotland, you're about to go crazy at this, because Tottenham and Republic of Ireland striker Robbie Keane is on his way up north and will be with you at Celtic Park shortly. And about an hour later, there were 3,000 people outside Celtic Park.
Yeah, Jim White on the transfer window with the lads last night on. I don't know if you'd managed to check out this piece. The highlight for me was when Nathan made the reach to compare Badil and Skinner, and the fact that, as he put it, football is a pretty po-faced place to be at times, like football punditry, and that Badil and Skinner obviously were the first people that kind of looked at football in a slightly different way with their show, and he was kind of placing Jim White exactly in that category.
And he took it quite well, did he?
Jim? Yeah. Oh, Jim loved it. I mean,
any comparison
who does not want to be?
Skinner
Absolutely.
Is a good one, yeah.
I just felt Nathan was sort of reaching a touch.
There's a sense of mystery there with the fact that he wasn't on Skype, with the fact that we didn't actually get to see the inside of his living room.
Right.
Like, does he have a yellow interior?
You'd assume so, yeah.
Match with the
Apparently
tie.
the lads were saying he has like 600 yellow ties.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why does he have 600 of them?
I guess he had to wear a lot of yellow ties.
But like, it's
a lot of ties.
That'll get you through almost 2 years worth of stuff. So
every day.
That's a bit pointless, to be quite honest with you, Jim. You could have spent your money a little bit better, mate.
Right, we're nearly out of time. We were going to talk to Kevin Kilbane about the Liverpool Spurs game, which is live on Off the Ball on News Talk this Sunday from 4:30, and a slightly extended show this weekend. But Kevin hasn't been able to take our call on because he's in transit, to be fair to him. We'd like to sort of cast some shade at him for various other reasons, about it being his birthday yesterday and all that sort of stuff.
His flight was delayed, I'm hearing in my ear.
No, look, at absolutely legit reasons, which we're happy to sort of bring some facts to the case here, as opposed to just generally slagging him off for not bothering to take the call.
Yeah, it's a very undramatic version of Jim White there, hearing in your ear that Kevin Kilbane's flight has been delayed.
And you're not wearing a yellow tie, so it sort of loses all kind of credibility. Just to give you a small bit of a flavour again before we leave you on this Friday morning, is some of the stuff that's happening across the newspapers this morning. A lot of coverage of the Riyad Mahrez story and the fact that he's gone AWOL. Is he going to play? Suddenly, Leicester City and Swansea City becomes a game you want to watch this weekend.
100%. Well, unless he's completely left out of the squad, which there's a chance that happens. And then it's all over and done with once teams are announced, and then the match happens and you don't care about that.
Assuming he comes back.
You would assume so.
He shows up for the game, because if you don't show up for the game, then the point we were making earlier on about the embarrassment of going back to your teammates, if you don't show up for the game, you've just doubled down on that. You're just bringing that on yourself now.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not so sure though, like about the Odemwingie versus Mahrez thing. I'm doubling down on this now myself.
Over it, yeah.
That the Odemwingie thing was more embarrassing.
You don't think it was?
Like that relationship with your teammates, it's a little more awkward. Mahrez was far more forceful in trying to get this transfer through than the way Odemwingie. Now, granted, Odemwingie
hopped into his car on. I don't think it could be any more forceful.
But Odemwingie wasn't exactly forcing it. It was like QPR were interested.
He hopped into his car and he drove to QPR.
But he wasn't like knocking on the QPR door saying like, sign me. The transfer was in place.
That makes it even worse. Because he wasn't even, it did feel, I think you're right, it did feel when he went down there that he hadn't even spoken to anybody. Just that the speculation was out there and he thought, I want to get this done.
That's not true, is it?
So I'm going to go, that's, granted shady, but that's my recollection of it.
I thought the situation with Odemwingie was that there was almost a deal reached between the clubs. And Odemwingie was like, well, I better get myself down there, because otherwise I'm not going to make the deadline.
I think he was trying to force it by physically getting down there. That was my understanding of it at the time. I'm sticking by my guns. I think that one was definitely more...
Then he's managed to trick one person there anyway. But yeah, an awkward one for Mahrez and his teammates. Certainly, as you say, it'll get a lot more awkward if he doesn't play this.
He's got to show up, I think. One of the other stories we just want to touch on before we leave you is in the Irish Daily Star this morning, where it's not Ger Loughnane looking to get the Clare job back. It's a story here by Kieran Cunningham of Stephen Colvert. You might have seen there's a 14-minute YouTube video going around about former, I guess, Irish sprinter Stephen Colvert, 200-metre runner. June 2014, he gets a call from Sport Ireland to say he's tested positive for an EPO, gets a 2-year ban. This video, anyway, casts a lot of doubt on the veracity of those samples and the fact that the samples themselves were dismantled essentially afterwards and binned, which makes it kind of difficult for the lab in Cologne to go back and actually, when he challenges it, to say, here, listen, there was nothing in this. Like, do you know what? At the time, you have some sort of recollection of this case cropping up, and everybody's Andy Dufresne in that situation. Everybody is. Because everybody says, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, but we're all in this, we've all landed ourselves in the prison here. But look at me, I'm innocent. Like, that's generally what happens here. And in the context of everything else that goes on in the world of sport and athletics, the various other sports that these things tend to crop up in, it is actually difficult to figure out who's Andy Dufresne and who isn't. But in his case, it seems, having watched that piece at least anyway, some of the leading voices on doping on the planet are coming out in his favour. This one is a YouTube piece, about 14 minutes, you can check it out. It certainly casts some doubt on whether this guy did actually have, whether he's guilty or not, and he talks about how it sort of ruined his life. He's trying to get into the legal profession. Tough line of work to get into. If there's any doubt about your career, although there are other cases of it happening in that way, but he's saying about the impact on his life, which is not something we should do, but not something we generally tend to think about when it comes to these cases.
I've got two questions. First of all, why were the samples destroyed? I think that's been a question that's gone with this story for a long time. But the second one is, why wouldn't he take on CAS? I know he cites the financial cost of 120 grand.
120k, that's a lot short of it.
But that's something that will work out in your favour should you be successful. And after yesterday's ruling against the Russian athletes, then you've got a huge chance of success clearly against the CAS, who want to... Like, there is only kind of sections of doubt around Stephen here. With the Russian athletes, there was evidence of a state-sponsored doping program going on, and they managed to get off the hook. I'd be pretty confident this guy would get off the hook as well.
I think you're right, but I just think that even if... I think you're right, because ultimately it seems pretty cut and dried, because you go back and you go, here, the samples were destroyed. Does that not say something to you? Because already out of technicality, surely that almost automatically puts you back in the innocent category. But I just think that... like, even if he's guaranteed to be proven innocent, 120 grand, where's he going to get that from?
Yeah, that's true.
What I mean?
The other thing is, though, where did the Norwegian lab get the samples from? They obviously got them before they were destroyed. Like, the Norwegian lab has disputed his findings. Like, if they don't have the samples, how are their findings legitimate if they didn't have the samples? My assumption is that they got the samples before they were destroyed.
Oh, they had the samples and they did the tests, and then they said that
then they returned
tested positive for EPO, and then somewhere along the track after that they just disappear, which shouldn't be the case. They obviously need to keep them.
My point is that the controversy around this was after, as I say, the laboratory in Norway, who then said, actually no, there was no EPO in his urine or whatever. What was the Norwegian laboratory testing? They obviously had the samples prior to the destruction, so that makes it even more bizarre that they would take the samples back after somebody disputes the findings and destroys the samples.
Yeah,
that's highly suspicious.
Well, yeah, and like in a broader sense as well, it's worth watching back the 14-minute piece. Don Caitlin is one of the voices that's in it, who's a really worldwide recognised voice on doping. But like, you always assume that these cases are really black and white. That actually the sample is taken, it's tested, it's kept in conditions that will mean that at some point down the track, when testing improves, you can go back and test it again. But you never assume that at some point along the track the test just goes missing. Like, that goes counter...
You can't assume it won't go missing either.
It goes counter to everything that makes a process, that makes it a process that we could possibly believe in.
But here now you're making a big assumption that athletics is a process that we can believe in, and that this is somehow tarnished.
Not to do with athletics, to do with WADA and to do with general doping structures. That
I don't think anybody fully believes in their structures.
But if we can't, then the whole thing is just a waste of time.
Well, then it already is a waste of time, because this is not the only situation where samples have been either A, destroyed, B, gone missing, or C, tampered with as a result of a government-run programme. There's evidence there on the record, and I'm not talking about Irish athletes here, I'm talking about all around the world, and that kind of ties into what you're saying about WADA. This is a global operation which has a lot of holes in it.
Busy weekend across all the off-the-ball channels on Scrum Saturday, which is back on your wireless from 1 o'clock tomorrow on Today FM. It's a stellar lineup of the Leinster wing. Adam Byrne, Lynn Cantwell is going to be there, and Billy Holland is going to be there as well, all alongside Neil Tracy from 1 o'clock. So some great prizes there to give away, including tickets to the Six Nations. What more do you want? That's all in association with Vodafone, so you can check that out tomorrow, 1 o'clock on Today FM. And it'll be followed live by Premier League Live. Ron Jones and Brian Kerr are on commentary duty there for Manchester United against Huddersfield. So that's coming your way. Phil Egan will be in the hot seat there on Today FM. That is from 2 o'clock tomorrow. Over and off the ball on Sunday, it's Tottenham up against Liverpool. Nathan and hopefully Kevin Caban, if he ever turns up, are going to be on commentary duty for that. So that's what's coming up there over the weekend. We've got a competition winner for you. I thought we were going to give it to our Extra Vision commenter from a little bit earlier on. The prize here is weekend festival passes to the Dublin Horse Racing Festival at Leopardstown. Damien Dempsey's going to be there. Stockton's Wing is going to be there. DJ Vogue Williams is going to be there. There's going to be 7 Grade 1 races. A lot of prize money, loads of comedians. Leopardstown.com for more details on that. And our winner on is not Extra Vision commenter from earlier on. This is from Wayne Ryan.
Well done, Wayne.
He says, hello lads. My story is a fabulous saga, so brace yourselves. It's going to be some plan, and I'll tell you any second now, or in just a min, go get melon, and off you go. Pretty good place to leave it. That's Friday's OTB AM. Owen, thanks a million. Enjoy your weekend.
Will do.
You'll be back on our video streams. Brian O'Driscoll, by the way, is going to be in studio, Tommy, on Monday. Excellent, with the lads on Monday morning. Where else would you be? 7:45 AM. Have a great weekend. Good morning.